Welcome everybody to today's panel discussion. I'm Jen Woods, I'm with the CMHA, and today with us we have Carrie Rachuk, who's a wellness coach with the Edmonton Public School Board, and Shauna Sebry, who is a parent to a gazillion kids, I just found out, and as well she sits on the Family Advisory Council at CASA. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to begin our little chat, but if anybody has any questions, there's a little chat button on the bottom. So please feel free to submit your questions and we will answer them as we go along. So I will leave the floor to Carrie and Shauna to introduce themselves and start the conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. I'll go first. Like Jen said, my name is Carrie, and I am a mental health capacity building wellness coach at Edmonton Public Schools. I'm also a social worker. And my job is to go into classrooms and talk about mental health. And so we generally kind of give universal strategies for mental health and wellness in schools. And so we serve from our little guys, from our preschools, our pre-K friends, all the way up to grade 12. And so I get quite a range of kids in my day, and I get to talk to them about mental health. And the other part of my job is parent education. So the part that I'm super passionate about is working with parents and families. And I get to do quite a bit of parent education in my role as well. So the good thing about my job is I get to see the kids and talk to the parents about mental health issues and parenting. And yeah, and so that's and I am also a parent myself of a 13-year-old girl who's just kind of entering those teen years, which brings with it all of the new adventures that we have as a teenager. So, and that's the thing about parenting, right? Is every stage is a little bit different. And I remember when my daughter was young and I thought, wow, man, if I could just get her potty trained, it's going to be easy, right? It's going to be a breeze after this. And then after that, every new stage has a different kind of challenge that comes with it, right? And so, yeah, so parenting is this kind of never ending series of challenges that we all are kind of going through. And so I think the privilege that I have in my work is being able to talk to a wide range of parents with varying ages of kids, and then also to go back into schools and talk to their kids. And and I think that really is a true privilege. And I like to, when I talk to parents, I like to have conversations about this parenting journey that we're all on, right? And how it can be a fairly universal feeling for a lot of us, right? For this parenting, it doesn't matter your economic status, your your cultural background, right? Parenting is a fairly universal feeling, right? We all kind of want the same things for our kids, and in that comes that connection with other parents. And I think as we go through our conversation today, it's about how similar we are and trying to connect with other parents. And I feel like Jen asked me when we first started how the last 2.5 years have been in school, and and we get asked that quite frequently. And I think really, when it comes back to it, we have to think about reconnecting our kids, right? Because we've told them for 2 years that they have to be by themselves and stay alone, and now we have to do the hard work of trying to reconnect them back to their communities, right? And so the other part, the conversations that I like to have with families and parents, and probably what we're going to talk a lot about today, is the conversation around mental health. And what conversations are we having around mental health with kids, and what conversations are we not having? And I feel like as parents, we get really kind of stuck in solving problems for kids and doing all of these things, and we don't often take the time to sit and really kind of listen to them. And you know, and universally kids are telling me that they're not heard, that people aren't listening to them. And yeah, and so those are kind of the conversations I have with parents about why aren't we talking about it? What is kind of that block that we have as families to kind of navigate that? And it's a tough conversation to have. And so we're going to start it today, hopefully. So I will leave that, and I'll let Shauna tell her story here. You can go ahead, Shauna.
Thanks, Jen and Carrie. I appreciate the opportunity to join your panel and chat about mental health. I am the single mom of 6 children who range in age from 10 to 32. With my oldest 3 kiddos, I had pretty neurotypical, I guess, kids. And so accessing mental health services and my experience with it was pretty much nil. However, 15 years later and 3 children later, I've figured out that my youngest ones have multiple needs, complex and diverse needs that require access to mental health services. So this has been my journey. It is daunting, to say the least. Seeking services in the mental health system feels intimidating. It can be overwhelming and lonely. That being said, I think that during our conversation today, maybe I can share some things that would help other parents along their journey, or perhaps Jen and Carrie to gain some insight into some other things that parents are finding struggles, or things that are even working for them as they journey with their kids. I guess one of the biggest frustrations for me is often the wait lists for getting into services. When we're able to tap into those services, we fill out all the wonderful paperwork, and sometimes there's overwhelming terminology, or the forms are so long, we get overwhelmed by them. But at the end of the day, we sit and we wait, and sometimes it feels like we're very much alone, and we watch our kids spiral downwards. And the feeling is helplessness. We feel hopeless and often defeated. I myself and my family have tapped into services through CASA. We've done the infant and preschool groups, mental health, psychiatry, the trauma and attachment groups. We've also tapped into Alberta Health Services for private counseling. And my own personal experience has been with FSCD, which is also known as Family Supports for Children with Disabilities. The intake for us has been reasonably accessible, I guess you could say. The people have been helpful in walking us through it. And I believe that the services that I've got from the agencies have been most helpful in us walking our mental health journey. I sometimes feel that I need to do more as a parent, or more immediate things for my family. But at the same time, when we have those wait lists, or the kids are in, what's the word I'm looking for? When they're actually, the mental health services that they're in, sorry, I'm a lost. Yeah, their treatment or the services they're going to are psychological services. Rome was not built in a day. And so our kids had a moment there. And so our kiddos are just day to day. And so sometimes it's at the end, we sit and we recognize, wow, have they come a long way? We just get to sit with that moment. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is often when we're waiting for services, or we already have services, is how do we gain more information? And with social media, as we were speaking about before we actually came on, we've tapped into that quite often. We need to understand that when we do, quite often what's on there could be only opinions. It can also be misinformation. So we need to ensure that we're getting factual information and from a reliable source. I found that Facebook has some private groups. Instagram may have some information that we can gather. Twitter, perusing bulletin boards at agencies and like Alberta Health Services immunizations up on the boards that will have information that you can also take pamphlets and find more information for. I found validation with many tapping into all those sites. It was that aha moment for me, and I didn't feel so alone. There's help. And I really appreciated the fact that there was groups of people who we could all discuss, you know, this is something I need help with. I need access to supports or strategies or other persons, or what does this mean? It was like the light bulb moment for us as a family.
And I think, and I just want to just add on to that for just a second, Shauna. And I think, you know, when we talk about the system and how complex that system is, it's a complex system. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's really, in my opinion, unfair to ask parents to navigate that system, right? And especially a lot of parents are navigating it alone, right? You know, I was talking to a psychologist not long ago, and he said, you know, if your kid gets cancer, we take care of that. We take care of all of that for you. We don't expect you to go find your own oncologist and find your own meds and find your own stuff. But as soon as your child has some sort of mental health struggle or issue or diagnosis, we expect parents to do all of that, right? Like the onus is then put onto parents. So that difference between that physical and mental health, that discrepancy still exists in that medical system. And you know, and I don't think parents quite realize until they're in that system how complex and sometimes really awful it can be, right? Because you do still get met with a lot of stigma, like you were saying, and a lot of people who don't believe you, and a lot of wait lists, and a lot of, you know, I can see you in 2 years and you're struggling, you're in crisis, right? And it's definitely a system that needs a lot of work, unfortunately. And you know, and for parents to navigate that by themselves, I think takes a, you know, it's a kudos to you and other parents who do it. It's you have to be really strong, and you know, it is tough. It is certainly a tough system.
It absolutely is. And I think that the other part of that is we are constantly telling our story over and over and over and over again. And I think there's a serious need to have mental health navigators, almost like a case worker as such, to help tap into those resources for us, or filling out forms, or answering questions about criteria, or saying, hey, you know what, it's perhaps time for you guys to just relax and absorb as a family, because it really is a daunting experience, and it's extremely stressful, not just on the core family, but the extended family, sometimes community members, and it can extend out to schools as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you both for that introduction and sharing your stories. And you both have touched on so many topics that I would love to dive into. I'm gonna narrow it down a little bit. Shauna, you mentioned social media and some of the positive things that can come from social media. As a parent myself, though, I do see a lot of people posting about their perfect families, and then you get into this routine of comparing yourself. And aside from that, as a parent, I think you are constantly feeling this shame and guilt of, am I doing this right? Am I doing enough? Am I providing enough support? And as parents, we get lost, and our mental health gets lost because we're so, as a parent, your number one priority is your child. So my question after saying all of that is, what advice can you give parents who are always questioning, are they doing enough? And how can they worry about themselves? Like, how can they, some advice on how parents can really tap into their own mental health so that they can provide a little more for their children? Very loaded question. Who wants to take it?
I'll start, because I think Shauna is going to be probably a better answer than what I have. So I'll start. I think about the guilt and the shame. It really is. It is a universal that parents feel this way, and it really, when you get handed that child, whether it's come out of you or given to you, you don't realize, they don't tell you before you get your first child that the instant you hold on to that child, you're going to get a wash of guilt and shame, and that doesn't leave you, right? It's a constant, am I doing this right? Am I doing enough? Am I, are they doing it better than I am? And it really is a feeling that parents universally have. And then I talk to parents about, well, what do we do with it, right? It's not going away. How do we help, right? Like, how do we take our guilt and our shame and say, you know what, that's enough, and move on with our lives. And I'll tell you a little story. I was doing a parent group a couple of months ago, and in this parent group, we talk about being enough and how we're enough for our kids. And this mom, she was washed in guilt and shame, and you could hear it in her voice. Everything she kept talking about was how she wasn't enough, how she wasn't doing enough. And I kept trying to tell her that she is enough, that your kids just need you however you are, however you show up, that's good enough. And really the point of that parent group is to tell parents that we're good enough. You show up with all of your flaws, you show up with all of whatever you have, and that's enough. It's enough for them. And she kept telling me, you're just being nice. You're just being nice to me. I'm not enough. And my co-facilitator chimed in, and he said, she's not that nice. she's not telling you this to be nice. You are enough. And that mom laughed. And I often think of that mom, and I think, I wonder if she's realizing, that she's enough. And I think as parents, we need to remind ourselves daily that what we're doing is enough, right? And we all know that social media, everybody's putting kind of their A game out there, and and that's not something we can live up to or compare to, but it's out there, and we have to try and deal with that in our own way. But that's always my message, is that you're enough, and that's how we kind of live with that guilt and that shame. Go ahead, Shauna. I know you probably have a much more succinct answer than that, but.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you, Carrie. I think it is a heavy burden to carry as family members, whether it be immediate or extended family. I think, as for my own personal self, to answer that question, in order to be able to get past that judgment, we need to be on our A game for ourselves and not measure ourselves with anybody else. For me personally, that includes self-care. And we all talk about self-care. We see it on social media. We hear people talking about it. But the need for self-care is so valuable and important, because in order for us to be able to be present for our kiddos, we need to be there for ourselves first. And so for me personally, it is doing things for myself. not being taken away from my child, but in order for me to be my best for them, I do things like going to the movie theater, reading a book, going for a walk, smudging, yoga, getting a good night's sleep, hydrating, exercising, eating well. And it sounds cliche, I've said this already, but it really does have an impact on our own mental health. And that allows me, or equates for me, moving forward and propelling the best version of me so that I can support my kiddos, because some days are worse than others and some days are great. So I take the energy from those great days, and that's what moves me forward. I have a friend who says, sometimes we just have to sit in the muck and just be with ourselves, and we hold space for ourselves and we give grace to ourselves, because that's what we need to do. It's just what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if I was to add on to kind of that self-care piece, all of those things you said, plus, like I said before, that connection piece, I feel like parenting is such an isolating gig, right? Because we think, for some reason, we think that nobody else's experience is like mine, or I'm doing this all by myself. Nobody else could possibly relate to how I'm feeling, and that's not the case, right? And I think for me, those times where I'm feeling like I just, I can't. I need somebody to I need that connection, right? I'll text. It's not even a phone call. If you don't have the energy for a phone call, just text somebody, right? Or try and get that connection somehow. And I feel like, especially for me, I text my best friend, and she knows if she needs to call me or not, right? And so it automatically kind of makes you feel better, along with all of those things, obviously, that Shauna said. But yeah, I got to add in my piece for connection with other people.
Very important. It's like a reset, hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And I completely agree. Having that support system in your friends and other moms and parents is so important. And there's the old cliche, it takes a village, and it truly, really does. So on that note, Shauna, you mentioned a lot of systems or agencies and support that you have had. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm going to try to write them down and get them in the chat, but maybe just if there are parents who, because it is a very difficult system to navigate. And Carrie, you said it so well that the onus is put on the parents, right? And you're just thrown out there to do it on your own. So can you both kind of touch on the support systems available to parents? And I will try to write them down and put them in the chat as we go along, but a little bit more about the programs out there would be fantastic.
I can jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead, Shauna. Yeah, if you miss any, I'll see if I can. I don't know that you'll miss any, but we can both do it together. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the one I guess thing that I wanted to mention first of all is for us, I found an awesome pediatrician who understands mental health, who will guide me to be referred to services. So if at all possible, find a good pediatrician.
Yeah, that's the most important part.
So valuable. CASA, of course, and CASA has services from infant preschool all the way up to youth. And I know that they also do parent psychiatric or therapy sessions as well. If your child is involved with CASA. We have done community mental health. We've done private therapy, such as play therapy and art therapy. We have also tapped into FSCD because my kids have qualified, which again was an application process and an intake. And we actually have a person who comes to our home approximately every 2 weeks and works directly with 2 of my children. Just trying to think who else we have used for services. Carrie, do you want to jump in now?
I'm just trying to think. I think you might have, the only other services I can think of, well, a Canadian Mental Health Association, they do have lots. I'm sure Jen will put that in the chat as well. They have some services for families. And one that I tell kids a lot about, that in the schools I tell them about it. It's not necessarily for families, but for kids specifically, we talk about Kids Help Phone and the distress line that CMHA runs. We have, I put that at the back of all my presentations for junior and senior high. And then really the only other ones I can think of are the diagnostics, right? The Alberta Health Services and the Glenrose and all of those. But I think, you know, services for families, I think you've kind of got it covered. You know, your pediatrician is your number one, right? And then hopefully if you find a good one, they can help you navigate some of the resources that are out there for families like FSCD and CASA and all of that. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I listed as many as I could. Thank you. That's, I think, so great for parents to know as a starting point, right? And we have a great question from Prosper Place. I sometimes feel frustrated and guilty when trying to talk about mental health with my kids who automatically resist it. Any tips on how to have those conversations and have the kids be engaged with me?
Yeah, and that's a question that I'm glad you asked it, because I think sometimes parents get really scared to talk about mental health with kids, and they really don't know how to start that conversation. And I think you just started as a conversation. I started with kids talking about feelings, right? So that's kind of at the base where we start, because we start with feelings and how, because really, you know, until they really know how they're feeling, it's hard to have those words, right? And so depending on the age of the kids, right, we talk about feelings, or they show me feelings, and then we try to put words to feelings. But really, that's at the base of talking about mental health. We have to start with the feelings. And sometimes, like Shauna said, we don't like, we get really stuck in the muck. We don't like to talk about feelings, but that's where we start. And you know, I'll throw this out there, is that you know, whenever I go in to talk to kids, I talk to classrooms, I always ask them, who do you talk to about mental health? Who do you talk to about this stuff? And I'm going to tell you, parents, we're at the bottom of the list, right? We don't even crack the top 5. We are at the very bottom. They will talk to a teacher, they will talk to a counselor, they will talk to their best friend before they're going to talk to us. And I think that is on us, right? I think part of that is they're not feeling heard, right? They come to us with feelings, and we try to, you know, we would just want them to be happy. And that's another universal parenting thing. We just want them to be happy. So we try to make them happy. And then it results in this whole not being heard thing, right? And so I think really, if we really want them to have that conversation with us, we have to start by listening to them, and start by really listening to what they're saying to us, without solving problems and without all of those things that we like to do. Because as parents, we love to solve problems. We like to get in there and you know, if they're saying that they're, you know, sad and they have no friends, well, why don't you have any friends? Let's talk about having your friend, right? But it's not about that. It's about the feelings. So we scale it back to the feelings, right? That's where I go. Do you have any other suggestions, Shauna, about how to talk about mental health with kids?
I think I completely agree with that. I think for me, keeping an open dialogue with my kiddos and talking about those feelings, and recognizing in myself that it can be extremely uncomfortable as well, and naming it to tame it. You're feeling angry. You said you're feeling angry, and just leaving it. And for my kiddos, they're a little bit older now. They quite often, if I leave it in silence, I find that they will add a few more things to it. They'll give me morsels or tidbits, which I can choose to leave and let them give me more tidbits of information. Or sometimes we just simply sit in it. And typically in a couple days, my kiddo will come back to me. I also validate that he has good friends right now, and I trust him to have conversations with those friends, but I always leave it open for him to have a conversation with me and tell him that I am open to anything he wants to talk about, even tough subjects.
Silence is your best tool. Because sometimes we feel like we have to fill that silence with questions and comments and problem solving, and that's not what they need. Right? They're the same as us. Like if you come home and you just want to vent to somebody, you don't want to talk about something, you don't want them to solve your problem for you, right? How frustrating is that? You don't want them to have all of these suggestions for you. You just want them to listen. And kids are no different, right? Yeah. So I think that, yeah. We see we're running out of time here.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Those are so helpful, those answers, and hard to live by as a parent. It's hard to not want to solve, but you're so right that silence is so important. So thank you. We will kind of start to wrap up. Is there any other questions you would like Carrie or Shauna to answer? Okay. Give it a little time. I will remind everyone we have one more panel tomorrow, and I will put the link for that in the chat. It's our last panel for Mental Health Week. But I don't see any other questions coming in. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. Perfect. So I guess we will say thank you so much to Carrie and Shauna for being here and having such a open conversation about mental health and parenthood. And I will resonate that as a parent, it's so nice to know that you're not alone and that, you know, we're all in it together. And so thank you from all of us for being here and having this conversation.
Good. Thank you for having me.
And while we wrap up, I have one little question that I just thought I would throw out there. Any piece of advice, one piece of advice you would give expecting parents as they enter into this journey of parenthood?
Well, my piece of advice is always trust yourself, right? You don't need to listen to anybody but yourself.
That's fantastic advice.
Shauna?
Well, I guess the fact that there is no book and there is multi-layers of what good parenting is. And I think you go with your gut instinct. And I think Jen, you had talked about the village and make your village big and rely on those people that you need to and trust your instincts.
Perfect. I love it. We will wrap it up there. Thank you again to both of you for being here, taking the time and having these conversations.